Thanks for tuning in to the weekly Ingest, where we curate the top cybersecurity stories of the week and walk through the key takeaways with our in house experts. This week, we're talking all things about bypassing MFAs, the threat of web applications being targeted in the retail sector during the holiday shopping season, and maybe if we have some time, we'll talk a little bit about malware. I'm your host, Jason Firch, and today I'm pleased to be joined here with Joshua Allen. Josh, thanks for being here.
All right, excellent intro. Love it. Weekly ingest. Just going to kind of cover what we're talking about today, which is really two big topics. It's coming from one's coming from the ZDNet article we're looking at right now, which is it's a message from Microsoft urging people to stop using phone-based MFA. And what we mean by phone-based MFA there is where it actually sends you a text message, so SMS-based multi-factor authentication. They're not talking about applications, and we'll get a little bit into, the difference there and why the SMS-based one is probably the weakest one that you can use. And then following that, going to get into kind of an interesting topic about web applications and attack surfaces. This is one article talking about it. I have a couple up that kind of cover the same thing. Some really interesting stuff in here because, and this headline is, typical headline, web application threat, right? So we'll dive a little bit more into here, but the more vulnerable than European counterparts is a little bit, I think it's a little bit sensational, but it is talking about some very interesting things here, about like old web app components and the actual size of these attack surfaces, and just some research and statistics around that. But
Great. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. So, Josh, before we get into these, because I know these two are really exciting, and then again, like I said, if we have some time, we'll take a look at how AI is kind of creeping into the malware space and into that game and trying to prevent those types of attacks. But Josh, before we dive into, I think we want to start with MFA. Tell us a little bit, viewers out there, a little bit about who you are, your experience, and your background.
oh, absolutely, yes. So currently, I am I am working actually at a company that does web application security, among some other things. So I'm a security operations lead there. Before that, I have over 10 years of experience working in the IT field for the Department of Defense and some other government sectors as well. It started out as where everybody else starts, actually in a call center, answering terribly simple questions. Moved into being a system administrator, and from there, I just kind of honed my craft, pivoted into the security field, really because if you're working for the government, you have to really understand that. It's part of your job, even as a sysadmin, to understand all the security. So, I was really interested in that, making things more secure. And then about 5 years ago, I moved out into the civilian sector to kind of see, the different side of things. Had some experience working with a startup company, as well as in the oil and gas industry, and now I am where I'm at, as well as doing some consulting on the side. But aren't we all right now in this economy, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that. And we always joke about you've touched so much in the technology space. We always joke that you're the go-to person if we have questions about something, and we always say like, "Hey, Josh, have you played around with the Palo Alto before?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, I've touched those before. I know everything about those." So
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm. Do I sound that cocky about it?
no, 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 no. You don't. But
I think what
it,
you call me, the Snapple cap of.
oh yeah. That's true. Yeah, if you have
I
any
like it.
doubts, it's Apple Cap technology.
I love it.
Okay, let's shift gears here. Let's get into this one. This article comes out of CNET. Microsoft urges users to stop using phone-based multi-factor authentication, um, and is encouraging app-based authenticators and security keys instead. So let's see here. Yeah, so to abandon the telephone based multi factor authentication solutions like the one time code sent via SMS and voice calls, and instead replace them with newer MFA technologies like app-based authenticators and security keys. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the one thing that most people use right today: SMS and voice calls to get their into their programs or their applications.
It's
Um,
definitely prevalent. To be honest, that would be a good statistic, something to research is what is the split there? How many people
mhm.
are using purely SMS based versus some of these other options that we have, like, YubiKeys and the applications. Um, this third paragraph here is very
Yeah,
interesting, right?
we're at here. Go for it if you see it.
Yeah, citing internal Microsoft statistics, Alex Weinert, director of identity security at Microsoft, said in a blog post that users who enabled MFA ended up blocking around 99.9% of automated attacks against Microsoft accounts.
Wow.
That is amazing. And there's a similar story from Google. This is what made me adopt the YubiKey. Is Google, they adopted YubiKey as their MFA, and they said that they too saw something like 3 nines of reduction in account takeovers once they implemented that. So that really tells you about the efficacy there of MFA and why it's really important. So
Hmm.
and that's one thing to glean from this is SMS MFA is better than zero MFA, bottom line. Right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's with security you can't be lazy, and
Mhm.
I don't mean that to be a harsh term, but I just mean that to kind of highlight the reality of it is that you can't just say, oh well, MFA is good, let me just pick the easy one and call it good and never think about it again, because the guys who are getting blocked, the hackers, the bad guys out there, they're constantly trying. That's all they do all day long is try to
Hmm.
beat this stuff. So, if you're complacent, if you have set something and forgotten about it, you're increasing your risk over time. And as the time goes on, that risk gets greater, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true and a great point. So let's see here. Let's continue on through here. The Microsoft exec cites several known security issues, not with MFA, but with the state of the telephone networks today. That's when he was talking about that. It's funny because I think I've tried the telephone MFA option just to see if it works, and then I've never used it again. I've always used the one-time passcodes, the SMS, but it's kind of funny. So definitely stay away from the telephone base. It seems more than anything. If you have to, the SMS is the way to go. Is that the way to think about that?
Yeah, and right here where your cursor's at, this is kind of telling. The Microsoft exec cites several known security issues, not with MFA, but with the state of the
Yeah.
telephone network. So um, this is where security gets complicated, right? Because what we're not saying is MFA is vulnerable. MFA is not vulnerable. The method through which you um, authenticate or use your MFA is vulnerable, and that's we're getting into like security in depth, talking about layered security here, which is you
Hmm.
know not only is the thing you're doing secure, but the protocol has to be secure. And SMS has been around since, I don't know, when did phones come out, right? I mean, since you could
It's
text,
an
and
old
they
technology,
it's
right? Well,
really
old
old
in the
technology.
context of 20
Yeah.
years.
And granted, they've made some updates since then. They've added some features. There is some security, but it's not encrypted. So the real problem here is that every message is sent over um, plain text. You can read it. So if you can man the middle it, you don't need to do anything other than catch it and read it. So
Hmm.
if you're waiting on an MFA code to come through and you've got like a femtocell or some kind of network node, or even if you're monitoring the traffic somewhere on this network, depending on where it is, and we can get into that a little bit, methods of attack later. But um, you just need to read it. You don't need to crack anything, and you can just pass it right on. So the user still receives their code, but before they've even had a chance to type it in, you've intercepted and sent it in. Obviously, not a manual thing. This isn't some guy sitting in the basement. These are a lot of these are automated tools, which is what you saw in that previous paragraph. 99.9% of automated attacks. So that's
Hmm.
an important distinguish to remember is automated attacks versus manual attacks. Those are very different things when it comes to your security risk,
Right.
to some degree. Not,
And the idea is just to block it before it even gets in front of a user, right?
Mhm.
You use security awareness training as a way to reinforce the detection and prevention aspect of it, but then you use these automated tools to prevent it from even getting to your staff, so that you can again, like you were saying, the layers of security, that just is an additional layer of security.
Right.
Um,
Important thing to remember with security is, not to get your head in the clouds, pun
mhm.
slightly intended. But, think of it more like home security. We don't really think about that much anymore. People just get home security. People lock their doors when they leave. People keep their stuff locked up at night. They don't keep, they don't just leave their house open, windows open. They don't leave their passcodes out. They don't just leave their key out for all to see. Everything's hidden, right? So,
Mhm.
and why do people do that? Well, because we know to, right? It is awareness training. We're aware of all these things already. It's been ingrained in our society for so long though that we don't really think of it as something like that. But um, that's where ideally internet security should be going, and
Mhm.
um, and really the only way to do that is to equip people with the knowledge. All the tools are great. It's just like locks, right? You can buy a quick set lock that's kind of
Yeah.
easy to tap open, or you can buy a really difficult Schlagerlock, for example, or something like that. But if you don't lock it, doesn't really matter, does it?
It's very true. It's very true. But I'm glad people are becoming a little bit more aware of things. Especially with like all the VPN commercials you see online. I mean, there's a surface level of security there. Definitely a topic for another time. But at least people are becoming more aware of security. So let's move on. Is there anything else that we wanted to wrap up this article with? What's a good takeaway here? For someone that's looking for an alternative solution. Um,
Yeah, so let's jump a little bit more into that real quick.
sure.
So we talked about why SMS is bad. It's pretty simple. Because people can read it. It's in plain text. It's not encrypted. There's a number of ways, which it talks about here: software-defined radios, femtocells, SS7 intercept services. So, man-in-the-middle attacks is what these are. And if somebody man-in-the-middles you, they can just read it, which makes your secret code not secret. So what do? Well, you do a couple things. One is you use the application-based MFA where possible, like Google Authenticator is a great one. That one's really simple to set up. Um, there's so many out there. I'm not even going to go down the list, but most of these are really really good. All the ones that you can search online for and find in the top 5 search results are going to be
Relatively accessible is what you're saying then. Yeah.
absolutely. I have like 5 different ones and I haven't paid for any of them. So there's
Oh,
tons of great
perfect.
free options. Yeah. Um, if you want to pay for stuff, there's some extra, cool little features, but you really don't have to. Now, if you want to step it up and do hardware MFA, which is something I like to do for my business assets, uh, I do a YubiKey. I'm really not sure what else is out there in terms of competitors. I know there's smart card, which is something that the DoD use frequently, and it's built into a lot of their different, the CACs and some of the other cards, as well as other little devices. So I guess you could call it a competitor. I really see them as a different grade, right? It's not really consumer grade, the smart card stuff, but the Ubico stuff definitely is consumer grade, and it's $50 give or take, depending on some features you get. They have them in all kinds of forms. USB-C, you can even use them on your phone. Super cool. Um, there's some other little interesting things you can do if you get the NFC ones. You can make some, quadruple factor authentication where you have to plug it into your computer, hit the NFC with your phone, and put your thumbprint on it, right?
And
If
it
you're
scans your face too. I've heard of that.
right. Well, you guys scan your face to get in your phone, right?
Oh
Put your
well, yeah, that's
fingerprint
true.
on there,
You know
right?
what? I
So
have I have had. That shows how dated I am. I have an iPhone 8. So there's a lot of great solutions out there, relatively accessible, virtually free, and for a pretty big payoff, you would say, from your perspective.
absolutely. And what's the payoff? Well, the counter of that is the risk, right? So I'm gonna pull this from another source, ZDNet as well as FBI.
Hmm.
So we've had a couple major ones. There was in 2016 was one of the earlier ones. Now that was a SIM swapping based attack, but again, that's one of the methods of capturing SMS messages. So they did this with eSIMs, so they could contact, or well, breach rather, AT&T and some Verizon other systems as well. I'm not sure the full breadth of that, but you could swap the eSIM to a different serial numbered device, because a lot of them, have these built-in SIMs now. So rather than a physical card, you can activate it based on the serial number of the device. So it requires either fraud, within the company, compromising somebody, or some kind of malicious entry into the company. And that was the first one that we really saw. Of course, methods used have been patched since then. That was 4 years ago. 2018, in 19 there was some SIM swapping with some other companies this time. So we went through it again. 2019, that was last year, was a big year for MFA MFA attacks, right? MFA based attacks.
And why do you think that is? People are just lax. The security's been out there a while. They feel safer with it, and then it's just a point of exposure.
No, I don't think it's that. It's a combination of factors that probably plays a little bit into there. But the other thing too is, once an exploit is discovered, you'll see a swell, a huge burst of its usage, because once it gets shared and a few people get their hands on it, some of these things are purchased. Some of them people are just very nice and put them out there for the other black hats to use.
They want to see how much chaos they can cause.
Right? Something like that. So yeah, everybody wants to try it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're all successful, but in the hands of the more sophisticated people, they're definitely going to be successful, especially against juicier targets. But a lot of it happened on small scale, didn't really have much impact. Those are usually like proofs of concept. It's like, all right, so I did get into the system. Now let me see if I can, hack an entire conference or something like that, right?
Gotcha.
Or a bank. We won't talk about that.
Okay, so great. So tons of great solutions out there. Is there any other key takeaways on this one?
I don't know. I think that covered it. What else would you want to know about this if you were a consumer using SMS-based MFA? You want
I mean, I think it really boils down to ease of use. It's gotta be convenient, right? People, it can't create any type of friction in your life.
That's a good point. Path of least resistance is what most people are going to take. It's just the natural way of things. So making the path of least resistance the correct path, the secure path, is something that we need to do as security experts.
Yeah.
In that essence, application-based MFA is so simple. Things like hardware MFA obviously require some setup, and they're for the more enthusiast, savvy, technical types, or if you just want to learn to do it, it's a good challenge. But there's no need to. I love Authy, I love Google Authenticator. You can set up most of them with QR codes now. So I mean, heck, I even have it on Star Wars. They give you a little QR code, you just scan it into your authenticator app, and boom, it's set up. It's super simple.
Yeah, why not? And if you can tie it into your actual login in some way, where it's all just one single click, one access, single sign-on type of approach, I think that helps with the friction as well.
Yeah, SSO is awesome. I wish it was more ubiquitous. I still don't use it in my everyday life because it's just not that friendly yet. But
Mm.
for enterprise, for work, that kind of stuff,
When it's all integrated into one system, it's very convenient. Yeah, and that's probably one of the best use cases for it. Okay, great. So this kind of ties this up. This is a great introduction. We'll add the link here in the description or somewhere. We'll add the link somewhere. Let's shift topics here and let's talk about web app security, and let's talk about the retailers as we head into the holiday season. This comes from EC Council. Some good peeps that we have some contacts there. Friendly, wonderful people. Web application threat. US retailers more vulnerable than European counterparts. That's interesting. Outpost 22, an innovator in identifying and managing cybersecurity exposure, stated that online sales surged by 30% globally in the wake of the pandemic, which also attracted various targeted cyber attacks. In its latest survey, 2020 Web Application Security for Retail and E-commerce report, that's not a mouthful, Outpost 24 highlighted the web application security analysis for the top 20 retailers in the US and EU. The research revealed that US retailers have a larger attack surface with an average risk exposure score of 35.1 out of 42.33. Very specific and sounds kind of terrifying. I don't know what those numbers mean. And an average score of 30.8 for EU retailers. Let's take a look real quick at the key findings here, and then we'll jump in on your take, Josh. U.S. retailers run 3,357 web applications over 401 domains. 8% of them are considered as suspect, and 22% of them are running old components containing known vulnerabilities. And then, in counterpart to that, the EU retailers run 2,799 applications over 509 domains, with 4% considered as suspect and 27% of them running on old components containing old domains, known vulnerabilities rather. Josh, walk us through this. What's
Yeah.
going on here?
So I don't know if you picked up on it, but this is where, and I said the headline on this is a little bit sensational. And these first two bullets is kind of what I'm talking about. So, oh my God, U.S. more vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
But let's go back to these two
Sure.
bullets here and really break it down, right? So they have more applications over less domains. So there's more web application density. So theoretically, yeah, they have a bigger attack surface. But really important is the second part of this, which is running old components containing known vulnerabilities. 22% in the US versus 27% in the EU. That's 5% higher over a less dense area as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. This is where the job of risk analysis and risk assessment can get cloudy, I guess, a little bit difficult. Right. So what do you consider riskier, having more applications to attack or having more vulnerabilities to exploit?
I guess it would depend on the total number of vulnerabilities, right? What's that 5% mean?
Right. Well, and it's kind of a trick question. There is no right answer.
Yeah, yeah. Which one would you prefer to be most? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and right now, I'm pretty sure if any of my old bosses are watching, a couple of them I know would be screaming their head off at that. But that's truly what I believe. I here's the thing. If it's exploitable, it's the most important thing, right? And there's a lot of stuff you have exploitable, so you have a lot of the most important things, and that's why patch management is super important. Because if you're not keeping up on your patches, that number of old components containing known vulnerabilities will grow. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because, like I said earlier, these malicious actors, these hackers out here, these guys are doing nothing but trying to find new ways into your systems. It's a Cold War, you know? Every time we release a new way of protecting, they find a way of circumventing, or they find a new 0 day or something like that. And, you know, there's, it's kind of it's interesting because each side has its advantage, right? The the black hat side, the malicious actors, they have the advantage of usually finding 0 days before researchers, although that's becoming less true lately, from what I've noticed. And they also have the advantage of, being able to secretively share these things around and exploit the systems, as well as they only need one avenue of entry, right? On the enterprise side, you have to think of every avenue of entry and put a gate on it, and block it, and protect it. And if you have 90% of your stuff covered, it only takes one of those other 10% for you to be owned. However, on the counter that is, enterprises and businesses tend to have a lot more money and they have a lot more support in defending against these attacks, more and more and more as well. everybody's taking it a lot more seriously now in the business sector finally. So we're seeing a lot more budgets going towards cybersecurity. We're seeing people take that more seriously, hiring more people, actually doing a lot of these programs, as well as some of the legal side, right? We have a lot of regulations now and laws like GDPR, things like that, that are actually pushing and forcing the industry to change for the better. Um, so,
It's definitely steering us in the right direction, I think. I don't necessarily like government mandated compliance and regulation. I think something like NIST framework is much better because what one framework or combination of framework is going to be the best for any one organization. It's hard to tell. But I do think it is evolving. And just again, we were talking about the Nord VPNs and all of that. I think in general, people are becoming more aware because the impact is starting to become more gruesome. Whether it's that poor person that died as a result of a ransomware attack in Germany, um, or the financial loss is just becoming compounding. Um,
I
so
mean, they've destroyed factories.
yeah, there's the physical ramifications of it as well, for sure. So just kind of putting this lens real quick on the scope of a retailer, if there's a retailer out there that's concerned about these numbers, how can you reassure them? What can they be doing outside of patching, or where's the light at the end of the tunnel here?
Well, we're specifically talking about web applications in this one, but there's some other ramifications as that. Let's talk about web applications real quick. First and foremost, making sure that you're not using vulnerable components is going to be your first line of defense. So make sure that you've got an actual security program in place. Patching is one part of that, but how do you know what to patch? You have to scan. You have to do vulnerability assessments. Um, and then that's only a part of it too, because those are, software vulnerabilities. Patching covers that aspect of it. But the other side of security that a lot of people forget is the administrative side, right? Even if all of your stuff is patched and got the latest components in there, there's no vulnerabilities that you know of that are exploitable out there, but your administrative accounts don't have very good password policies. You haven't turned off old accounts from people who've quit the company. Things like that make all of that effort you've put in there essentially worthless. It's kind of harsh, but it's true. If you've spent all this money and time setting everything up and you haven't actually administered it properly and you've left it open to exploit, complete waste of your time. Um,
Yeah, and the way I kind of look at it is it's you're creating the right countermeasure for the right threat, right? Or you're implementing the right countermeasure for the right threat. Um,
so yeah, the right countermeasure for the right threat is a good thing to talk about. And this what is it? Fourth bullet here, jQuery versus 50% for US. So more of them in the EU are using jQuery. This makes the headline of this thing make a little bit less sense. I'm not trying to bash EC Council here, but like, it's just
I
kind
mean,
of funny
it
because
could just be like an aggregate. It could
yeah,
have been
yeah,
from another post.
it's okay. But anyway, so they're running outdated jQuery, right? That's a huge thing. 90%.
That
That's
is
that is
that is ridiculous.
massive. 9 out of the 10 EU retailer, top EU.
And I don't know what the breakdown is percentage wise. Bottom dollar value or euro dollar. Um, but I would imagine that the top 10 of anything probably makes up a large percentage of the whole.
I mean, the EU economy is no slouch.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money we're talking about
yeah.
there. So it makes you wonder why, right? Why are
Mm-hmm.
we running these outdated components? I think one aspect of that is people just not having a secure CI/CD pipeline. Um, they're they're not doing a secure software lifecycle. They're not thinking about that. They're not shifting left. Shifting left is extremely important, right? The earlier you get security into your process of CI/CD and developing software, the cheaper it's going to be.
Hmm.
Which kind of sounds funny if you've ever been a person who's approved a budget for a tool, right? It's there could be sticker shock up front, but a really important thing to remember is technical debt.
Yeah.
The technical debt can be significantly higher than the investment in some of these tools if you wait, especially if you've waited until you've already been hit with a ransomware attack and now they want $10 million, right? And you really wish you had signed that $70,000 contract.
$70,000 doesn't sound that bad. Yeah.
Even $700,000 sounds better than $10 million ransomware, especially because you don't even have the guarantee that your data hasn't already been shared on the internet, exposed, and or will be used later, right? So, waiting until you've been hit is too late. Unfortunately, a lot of industries have waited that long. Um, Sucks to be you. I guess it's really the only thing to say.
Yeah.
It just we're at the era now where we just can't keep pushing cybersecurity to the back. You've got to think about it in all aspects. So, web applications, develop more secure web applications is the answer. Don't implement it early. Make your developers a secure shop. Make them learn security. That has to be a part
Yeah.
of it. And that has to be part of the education too. A lot of the software development still doesn't really include secure coding in there. Now, a lot of it does, granted, but I've definitely seen courses that just focus entirely on how to build the cool thing, make the cool function, do the cool stuff, and they haven't talked about how to keep people from manipulating that to steal lots of money from the company you work for. That's kind of your own job security.
Yeah, it's got to be baked into the process, and like you said, that secure software development lifecycle. And it's you're baking it into the process as you're developing. And there's some third-party software that implements security in real time as the developer is coding. Well, I don't know anything specific about it other than that it exists. So maybe that's one route for companies, but the technical debt thing is one thing that is often overlooked, like you were saying before. And you get into a situation where you're spending more time resolving vulnerabilities or bugs in your product than you actually are developing new feature sets for the product, and that's
Right.
just not where you want to be.
So let's break that up a couple. I mentioned something I want to cover here real quick. So I talked about SSDLC, Secure Software Development Lifecycle. So there's three things really to take away from that, which is Microsoft Software Development Lifecycle. And actually, they've developed all the phases for it. To be honest, it's really not different from SDLC. You just have to include, security considerations and everything. Next is NIST 800-64. That provides a lot of security considerations within the SDLC. Um, those were all standards developed by, federal agencies, used by federal agencies. NIST I really like because you can take NIST and you can conform your business practices to it without actually, saying like I'm going to be a NIST shop, because it can be pretty intense. It's designed for federal agencies, but what you know takeaways from it are really good. Um, and then there's OWASP. OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. They cover a lot of stuff. They even have tools for testing web application security, which I'm going to talk about next. Um, they have a thing called CLASP, Comprehensive Lightweight Application Security Process. It's kind of the same thing. Very simple to implement. It's based on the Microsoft SDL, but it also includes a map of the security activities to roles in an organization, which I think is really cool. So you can actually, if you're a project manager on an SSDLC, you can you can already map out who the stakeholders are going to be for each of these parts, which is super cool. So that's how you can shift left SSDLC, look it up, learn it, do it. Next thing is making sure that your stuff is actually secure. So let's say you've done all this, you've bought all your security tools, you've scanned your code for vulnerabilities, but how do you know those administrative controls are working? How do you know that there's not some kind of 0 day out there? How do you know that, it it just, was wrong. Sometimes it happens. You know, it looks
A
all
lot,
clean
lot
on
of
your
false
scan,
positives. Yeah, no, it
or
happens all the
yeah,
time. All
yeah,
the time.
or false negatives rather. You know, it says no,
Oh
you're
yeah,
good.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
both happen. True. Um, so you have to test it. That's the only way. So it's the same way you find out bugs in your system, right? You have to put it in the hands of people and testing it. Now, when we're talking about secure SDLC, we're not talking about beta testers and bug testers. We're talking about pen testers, right? We're talking about people who are trying to break into your system using flaws in your code or flaws in the administration around your application, which is extremely important and a lot more common um, than I would like it to be. uh, I was going to say more common than software flaws, but I don't really know. That's an interesting one. I'd like to look up is, you know, what are the main avenues of attack is through vulnerable components or through poorly implemented security controls.
That would be a really interesting one.
Maybe a topic for next time.
Yeah, maybe if anyone's done some research on that or knows anyone who does, hook us up.
Awesome. So what can you do about that though? Well, you can also scan. There's a scan for everything these days. You know, there's an app for that, right? There's a scan for that. Um, CIS controls are really good. If you're in AWS, there's CIS scanners. If you're in Docker, there's CIS scanners. That's a good base level. That's just looking at very simple stuff like, do you have a 24 character um, complex, non-reusable, 90-day rotatable password on your admin accounts, which by the way are 4 separate controls that it checks for. Um, but it could really just be one. Stuff like that. IAM, administrative controls. A lot of people fail there. You know, I've seen plenty of applications I've gone through. We've done the vulnerability testing. The application's actually using secure code because these guys have been keeping up on their patches. Their Red Hat servers aren't, you know, ancient. All these great things. But then it turns out they left a default admin password somewhere in there. So,
Hmm.
you know, it's
It's
super
as
easy to
easy
get
as
in.
that, right?
It is, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about. Is we only, you know, if from a black hat perspective, from a pen tester or a black hat perspective, we only need one avenue to get in. That's it. Just one hole. It's like a boat, right? You drill a hole in the bottom of the boat. Doesn't matter where it is. Water's getting in. You know, so
And then it's your responsibility to turn over to the CFO or whoever and say, yeah, so about that 100 grand we spent, um, well, Tony clicked a link or this password was set to the default, and yeah, we need $5 million.
don't click that link. You know, and
Uh,
that's here's another topic I think we can really get into, but we might want to save it for another time.
yeah, let's say yeah. Let's actually start wrapping it up here today. But yeah, phishing is a big one.
Yep. If you click something, all your other security stuff doesn't really matter necessarily, with some caveats there, of course. But yeah, let's wrap this up. What else do we want to talk about here with retailers and web apps?
I'm good here. Do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up?
Um,
Do we want to summarize this real quick?
yeah, actually, I'd say one more thing, one more angle to check this out. What do you do if your system cannot be patched? A lot of point of sale systems and things like that actually can't be patched,
It's a
or
good point.
you're using code from somebody who you've contracted and you've asked them to patch it, and they have a 60-day patching cycle, which is madness. But I've seen it, you know, something like that. What do you do? Well, that's where you need compensating controls and security in depth. So a web application firewall might be appropriate if, especially if you have, you know, the volume to afford going through something like that. They're kind of expensive, but they're very effective. Um, that's not a single thing either. Um, Implementing some kind of RASP, which is runtime application security protection, and it's kind of a new technology. Rapid7 has some interesting stuff on that. We could talk about that later, but it's another layer that you can do in there. And of course, doing those audits, making sure that your administrative controls are good, all those kinds of things you can do. A lot of systems cannot be patched, and you know, it kind of sucks for the people who are using a vendor kiosk or a point of sale system. And I've almost always gone through those when I've done pen testing. If they have kiosks and POSs, there's almost always an exploit to go through. So
That's a topic onto itself then, because I didn't realize that that was such a vulnerable point, and given that.
Well, a lot of these proprietary kiosks actually build on Microsoft XP.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's maybe like a two-part series. That's like a I'll have to dive into that one. Okay, so this is great, Josh. I really appreciate you taking the time and shedding some light on MFAs and the threat of web app security. Any final thoughts on this today before we close out?
No, but I would love to hear from some other people to see if, there's some information we left out, topics we want to keep covering. I'd love to make these more useful for people to ingest and digest and enjoy and learn from. For me as a passionate security expert, I want everyone to be experts in security, which I know will put me out of a job, but that means I can retire.
And if someone wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to get in touch?
Well, that would be through the PurpleSec contact, Joshua at purplesec.us. And
Great.
that's going to be my main contact for now. But we'll probably have something a little more interactive set up in the future. What do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
eventually I
eventually, I
think
think
so.
so.
We'll
We'll
figure
figure
out
it
the
out, the
kinks, and
kinks,
we'll
and
get
we'll get
into
into
a
a
better
better
stride
stride
here
here
with
with
these
these
shows.
shows.
Yeah, I think
If
if
anyone
wants
wants
to
to
reach
reach
out
out
to
to
Josh,
Josh,
you
you
have
have
questions,
questions,
feel free to email
email
him.
him.
And
And
thank you so
thank
much
you
for
so much for
watching, and
watching.
we'll be
And we'll
back
be back
here
here
next week.
next week.
Take care.
Take care.